5:31 PI Pacific Mornings with Aggie.
Marlon Elaine, welcome back to Pacific Mornings with Aggie here on 5:31 PI. We're sitting at 13 minutes past 8 o'clock. Now, Repatriate. It is a live performance work by internationally renowned Tongan artist Latai Taumoepeau. And Repatriate is a powerful performance that demonstrates the dire impacts of climate change on our Pacific nations. Taumoepeau dances in a Perspex glass tank wearing a life jacket and floatation devices around her midriff and arms. Now, over a period of 60 to 90 minutes, this tank will slowly fill with water using the Tongan concept of a fibre. So joining us to tell us a little bit more about this is none other than Latai Taumoepeau. With that, I say malo lei, malo ho. Si mea mai he pokalama he pongpongini.
Morena Aggie, thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely, Latai. It's so good to have you on the show and to meet you for the first time. And to hear, I mean, this sounds very outside of the box of anything that I've seen when it comes to art. Now, climate change, though, itself, it is a huge issue, and I love that you're tackling that. What has actually led you to address it, though, through this type of live art?
Well, I think like many other people from our cultural background, we're really involved in our community and our social issues. And I guess back in 2007, I was doing some volunteer work and learnt about climate change, and it really shocked me,
Yeah.
So I found myself escorting some people from different Pacific Islands to the climate change conference, the United Nations Climate Change Conference back in 2007. And that's where I learnt a whole lot of incredible things, just by observing the plenary sessions, and then also presenting side events with the other Pacific people to try and understand, what our place was in this big global conversation around climate change. And at that time, there wasn't a lot spoken about climate change, within the greater community. But in the climate change conference itself, it was a huge topic, seeing the Pacific Island nation leaders having conversations and negotiations was just like an incredible sight. And it was also, there were many demonstrations as well, by the local people at that time. It was in Indonesia. That was COP13, and I really was quite moved and really interested in how the vehicle of the arts can be part of an ongoing campaign. There's people familiar with rallies and petitions. That's and right. Things like that, but at that time I was still kind of finding my performance practice, and I come from a contemporary dance and theatre background, and I'd been doing what other dancers do, working in companies and ensemble work and playing around with ideas, but I just couldn't reconcile what my practice was. And right. So after 2007, I, returned back to Sydney, and, I just started to reflect on how my practice could continue to feel like I'm working in service of these big issues that I felt quite, I didn't have a grapple on, or I didn't have any control around. So, I learned a lot from the other Pacific people that I travelled with. There was a beautiful woman who I travelled with, Rufina, who was, from the Carteret Islands, and they were already experiencing relocation.
Right.
From their island, and so they're known as like the very first environmental displacees. And at that time, she had taught me a dance from her people, and she had also told me that she was, she was about 70 years old, and she'd never left her island nation, and this really blew me away, because I'd grown up moving between Sydney and and Tonga, spending time with my grandparents, and really having a sense of my own village, and and these ideas of belonging. And so when Rufina was telling me about how her people and her kinfolk were busy making berowana, it's a currency, a shell money,
Right.
because her people were matrilineal, and they were busy making this shell money so then they could exchange it for land, in a higher island, like in Buka, in the autonomous region of Bougainville. It really blew my mind and made me think about the collective making which, you know, I'm really familiar with ngado making and weaving and all of these incredible art forms from the, you know, the Pacific. And so I really needed to, I came back and I got really busy. It took me about 5 years to try and reconcile how my
Wow.
practice, like how can dance do something or have a voice or, you know, just these big questions. That's what artists do, is
Of
they
course.
ask questions, and, you know, they poke and prod at these things. And so it was because of that that I really started to, you know, try and understand, you know, how the dances that I've seen and learnt in my life, what they do. They tell the story, a poetic story about the various island nations that those dances come from. And so, you know, I did my first performance when I was 5 with, you know, in my village of Nukunuku, where my maternal grandparents were. And, you know, it really made me think about, you know, every little detail, the costuming, like where those leaves from, what, you know, what are the materials of that, what is it doing, what's that dance about. And so,
Right.
you know, coming from an oratory culture, it became apparent to me that that was the first place to start thinking about some really big concepts, you know, that we have, like whanua, and, you know,
Yep.
what words like that mean, and how I might use that as a starting point to really unpack a very emotional and heavy, you know, issue that, you know, that seems like it's so far away, but actually it affects our communities. It has been affecting our community for more than 20 years, actually. So I wanted to use my position as a diasporic Tongan woman to do something, and speak to communities that, you know, that aren't necessarily ever going to really hear so much from our people. So I wanted to
Yeah.
be you know, that person doing that work.
Lada, can I ask though? Of course, going from look, thank you for sharing. Even from the age of 5, you know, being having to perform there to journeying and then coming to this very moment where you are now doing this piece called Repatriate. Uh, Even just the tank itself, and then standing in there doing a favor, and then having the tank be filled with water. What was the concept? I understand it's climate change, but what even led you to just that's the type of piece that you wanted to perform?
I think the first things are, you know, the impacts that are already being experienced by our, you know, by our Pacific folk in that are still living on the island nations. Sea level rise is one of the major, you know, ideas, concepts that we're dealing with as a concept, or we were dealing with as a concept at that time when I made that work, you know. But now it's become really, you know, no, it's just local knowledge now. But you know, things like sea level rise, things like the, you know, the infiltration of salt water into the fresh water, which is
Yeah.
affecting the food sources, you know, just these ideas. And also, you know, living in a wealthy country like Australia, you
Yes.
know, it really made me engage with the economics of climate change as well. You know, I didn't want to, you know, I'm not really interested in economics, but part of what goes into researching the work that you're making is about understanding as many things as possible. And so seeing the disparity
Yep.
between Pacific Island nations and in a wealthy country like Australia where I live, and a, you know, wealthy countries like Aotearoa, it really did make me think about the difference, and how, you know, we have drills all the time in our workplaces, in our schools.
Yep.
You know, when you hear that alarm, you run out, you've got to, you know, assemble somewhere, and you can literally, you know, relax a little bit and let emergency services take over. But it made me reflect on, you know, in our island nations, you know, they don't have that kind of infrastructure, you know.
That's right.
That those people that live in those villages, they're doing it for themselves. They are the emergency workers, you know. So, you know, they're doing these things because of their love of their home and their land and their communities. So, you know, I think Repatriate for me was this idea of some of the ways that we access our culture is through, you know, the collections of things in museums and these big types of institutions. And so I just wanted to bring that closer to how we see ourselves and think about the vulnerability, you
Yeah.
know. And so the the work Repatriate is trying to address the risk of people just surviving the, you know, these disasters that are increasing. So the tank is an abstract way to just to really address, you know the issues that people are already facing, but also to use the body, the poetics of whanua, that it's the body, it's the the placenta, it's the burial site, it's we have these very incredibly deep concepts in our culture. So
yeah, can I ask Latai though? Sorry, I know we have to wrap up because the time is upon us. I just really want to just get, where can people go, and how can they actually find out about the show if they've never seen anything like this? What can they actually expect from the show?
So the work was made as a video work first, so it's already in the exhibition is open at the Auckland Art Gallery.
Nice.
And it sits inside a show that was curated by Ane Tonga, the curator there, who I've been working with to bring this work to Auckland. The performance itself will be live on Saturday at 3:30 p.m. in the forecourt. Awesome. So you can attend. It's not ticketed. It's a durational performance, so it goes for about an hour. Wow. And so I'll be performing inside the tank the dances that I've learnt in my lifetime.
Yes.
So because this is the language of the various island nations that I'm speaking about, and so. It's approximately an hour long, but the video work is already in the exhibition that's already up in Auckland Art Gallery.
Beautiful. Latai, look, I'm sorry that we have to sort of wrap up and whatnot, but I love hearing the story, and I love the purpose that you have behind the reason why you're doing this live performance art. So we look forward to it, and we will have the links up on this Facebook page so that people can actually head there, and hopefully we'll see some of our people come through and support you. But again, thank you so much for your time this morning, Latai.
Thank you, Aggie.
No worries. That, of course, internationally well-known artist, it is Latai Taumoepeau. If you want to check out this full interview, head to our 531PI Facebook page as we head back to some music.